Hello everyone, and welcome back to another Strategoi video. Ryan here for day 4 of the Scourge of Ghyran series. Today we've got the Gloomspite Gitz. They're going to be up. So we, thus far, out of the first 4, 3 of them have had battle tomes already. Gitz being along with Stormcast and Skaven. And then, of course, we had maybe, I guess you could say, a surprise entry of Flesh Eater Quartz yesterday. This will be rounding out week 1 because I'm pretty sure they're not going to post articles over the weekend, which gives me some time to maybe do my personal roundup of worlds this year. We also got today, if we scroll down a little bit further, in addition to the Git stuff, we got a little bit information about battle tactics. So I'm going to spend the first part of this video talking about that because the Git stuff shouldn't take too long, but we'll get to it momentarily. And before I forget, guys, don't forget to hit like, share, and subscribe. Join us in the Discord. Share this around with your friends to help boost the signal that Strategoi is back in action, and we're real excited and pumped up. Talked to Jonas yesterday, and we're going to get him on a video soon, at least to talk about some of his main factions. He's a little busier these days, but hopefully for Lumineth, Sylvaneth, Soulblade, and Seraphon, we'll at least get him involved. Looks like the next one's going to be about Nighthaunt, though, so it won't be on Monday. Anyway, all right, let's talk about the new battle tactic stuff. So at the bottom of some of these articles, they've been giving us some information about what we can expect from the GHB in general. So this is good context to have. And of course, when the GHB comes out, we'll release another kind of comprehensive video about that. But these little tidbits are helping us kind of get an idea of what's coming up. Now, what they said here is battle tactics have changed in the upcoming General's Handbook. During army composition, you now pick 2 battle tactics cards, each of which has an overarching theme, such as scouting out the battlefield, destroying particular foes, or controlling specific objectives. So let's start there. As the game now exists and has for a while, battle tactics are something that's available to some extent for everyone during the game. Right now we've got 6 generic ones plus 2 per Grand Alliance, but now this is switching to something that has to do with your army composition, list building. So that's actually pretty interesting. And you pick 2 battle tactics cards. It looks like we're going to be looking at one down below. And they have different themes of what you're supposed to be doing. So this is already kind of becoming more interesting for the list building types out there. And I'm assuming all armies are going to have access to all of the battle tactics cards, but I guess it could be that some have access to special ones or whatever. Let's take a look at this first example, though. I don't think I can zoom in on it too well, but so this one's Scouting Force. At the start of the battle, every friendly non-hero infantry and non-hero cavalry unit wholly within friendly territory becomes a scout unit. You cannot complete these battle tactics with scout units that are in combat. Replacement units that replace scout units are also scout units. So let's talk about the implications for this card. So first off, we're only looking at infantry and cavalry. So you're wanting to build towards those. If you have an all monsters list, then you wouldn't choose this one, right? And it's non-hero, so for both of those. So if your only infantry you've got or only cavalry you've got happens to be hero, then of course you're not going with that. Secondly, it says at the start of the battle, units wholly within friendly territory become a scout unit. This seems to imply to me that if you're in reserve, you would not qualify for this. So now for armies that like to be putting units in reserve, like Stormcast, you might have to think twice about doing so. So keep that in mind, at least for this card. And you cannot complete these battle tactics with scout units that are in combat. So these units are also kind of acting like prospectors in the sense that they want to stay out of combat, and they're going to be extra afraid of, say, a countercharge or something like a Murder Lust or whatever. Replacement units, however, that replace scout units are still scout units, so that's nice. So if a unit started in Deep Strike and then got killed and then came back, it still wouldn't count as a scout unit because it never was a scout unit. Okay, so it looks like we've got 3 different battle tactics here. Affray, Strike, and Domination. I have no idea what that means, but there's 3 different types, evidently, and then names for each one: Raiding Party, Bold Explorers, and Courageous Adventurers. I don't know how many cards we're going to get, but it's already sounding like we're going to get more battle tactics than we're used to. If there's at least 4 of these cards, then we've got 12 that everyone's going to have to know. And if you think about how this past GHB worked, we had 2 per Grand Alliance, so that's 8 plus the 6, so 14, that maybe you'd have to be aware of that exist. So, you know, depending on how many cards they give us, I could imagine they give us 6 cards, each with 3, so that's 18. So who knows? But let's take a look at each. They all seem to be worth 5 victory points, and there's also some arrows that point down. I don't know if that has anything to do with the sequence in which you do them, but maybe it's just an aesthetic thing for the cards. So the first one, Raiding Party. You complete this battle tactic at the end of your turn if there are 3 or more friendly scout units wholly outside friendly territory. This is going to depend on how the maps are drawn, where exactly wholly outside would be. Some missions are going to be easier than others, but it doesn't say wholly than enemy territory, so that's good. If there's some no man's land in between, then you can just walk outside of yours, and then you're good to go. And they just have to be standing there. Now, granted, you cannot complete these battle tactics with scout units that are in combat, so you do have to stay out of combat as well. That was implicit in the rules above. Okay, that seems pretty cool. Of course, you need to have 3 or more friendly units that count as scouts, and they need to be alive. So if you started with only 3 and you get one of them gets killed, this tactic goes out the window. Now, I don't know how the system's going to work. Are we going to have backup tactics that you can do? Can you do these more than one time? Who knows? But right now, it's only looking like 3 turns worth if you only get to do 1 apiece. So I'm not sure how that works. Okay, Bold Explorers. You complete this battle tactic at the end of your turn if 3 or more objectives or terrain features that you control in any combination are being contested by any friendly scout units. Those objectives and terrain features must be within enemy territory. So just within, could be partially within. Controlling a terrain feature, you have to keep standing next to it, at least with the current rules. And that's within 3 inches of the terrain feature. So if you walk away, you don't control it anymore. So now people are going to have to be more cautious of what they're controlling to make sure that you don't have an easy Bold Explorers battle tactic. So that seems doable. Obviously, with armies with teleports and stuff like that, this is really great. Deep strikes, I would say, would be nice, but then again, most likely with most deep strike rules, you wouldn't have started on the battlefield to begin with. There's some exceptions like Ideneth that could be able to go back up with the 1 battle formation, but in general, deep striking is not going to work with this. You're going to want to have to teleport. And then the last one, Courageous Adventurers. You complete this battle tactic at the end of your turn if a friendly scout unit that was not set up this turn, so not teleporting, deep striking, but again, what I said about deep striking, is contesting a terrain feature that you control that is wholly within enemy territory, so not just within like the last one, but now wholly within, and that is more than 6 inches from friendly territory. Interesting. So it's really going to be dependent on how everyone sets up the battlefield, and depending on how they do that, maybe they set that terrain up just within 6 inch. For every terrain piece they can squeeze out of it, that has to be wholly within their territory so that none of them are options, and then they just keep protecting the other one. Again, I have no idea what the rest of the battle tactic situation is going to look like, but these look very thematic for the idea of a scouting force, and you know, I dig it. I think it could be cool. Let's see what this text here says, so maybe we're going to get some more explanation. Each card contains 3 battle tactics, and you have the length of the game to complete as many of them as possible. The twist is that you have to complete them in order. There we go. So I should have read this first. And they get progressively harder to achieve. Yeah, I agree with that. The Scouting Force card, for example, is particularly well suited to fast infantry and cavalry, or to factions with plenty of movement shenanigans. Ideal for Skaven or the Ideneth Deepkin, maybe less so for Maggotkin of Nurgle. Okay, so that answers that. You have to complete them in order. I'm assuming that means you can't repeat them twice, and maybe if this is all that you have with battle tactics, then battle tactics become less of it's more like a grand strat, the way those used to be, where you get max instead of max 3 points for a grand strat, now max 15 points, and then the main bulk of your points is coming from your primaries, perhaps. I don't know. We'll have to see how they structured everything, but this is definitely mixing things up and making it quite interesting. What do you guys think, though? I'll be moving on to Gitz right now, but let me know down in the comments. Pause the video and let me know what you're thinking about this system. Okay, so let's get on to the actual Gitz content. Obviously, we started with the same lore video, and then we scroll down here to see 2 new units we're going to be getting that are Scourge of Ghyran versions. This is going to be our 2 Fanatics swords. We've got Sporetera and Loon Smasher, both of which have always been unit size 5, and that stays the same. They stay on the same type of base. The Sporetera are going up 10 or 20 points, at least from what we currently have. Or sorry, down 20 points, excuse me, it's the other way around. And then the Loon Smashes are staying the same points, if I'm not mistaken. I'll double check that real quick. Yeah, 110 for 5. Otherwise, everything else is the same. So let's go look at their Warscrolls. Okay, so Loon Smashes up first. If you don't know, these units basically came out of like fantasy / I guess you could say the old world now, where these units historically have kind of like popped out of a unit, they hide and they go crazy and they're uncontrollable and very random, which is why they both have 2d6-inch movement. Now, nothing about the wheel has changed. They've always been 2d6 movement, 1 health, 1 control, 6 up save, at least since the index. And then the keywords also haven't changed. That's going to be infantry, destruction, Gloomspite Gitz, and Moon Clan. So they count as some of your Moon Clan dudes if you get a buff that affects them. Let's take a look at the weapon profile. This is Ball and Chain. Now, I'm a big fan of this unit, have been for a while, because I like high risk, high reward, big swingy type units. Now, they've always had D6 attacks, and now they're getting a flat, reliable 3. Now, if you know anything about rolling dice, a 3.5 is statistically average. So over the course of many D6 throws, you're actually going to be seeing a decrease in the output here. So for every 2 dudes in your unit, you should be getting 7 and not 6 like we're seeing here on average. The rest of the stat profile stayed the same. So let's take a look at their abilities that may or may not have changed. On the original War Scroll, we had a deployment phase ability that was called Hidden Loons. Now we have Lost in the Horde. And it basically was just one of these deep strike abilities, which says you pick this unit if it has not been deployed, set it up in reserve, hidden among the mobs. It has now been deployed, and it's a deploy ability. Now it's exactly the same thing, except now it's got the keyword Lost in the Horde. Okay, so let's see let's talk about what it used to do and what it now does. First off, it's worth pointing out that there was a passive ability on the original War Scroll that was very strong, where the unit always has strike first, and that is nowhere to be found anymore. This could mean Loon Smashes are just going to die if they don't get to go first. So that does change the vibe a little here, but let's see how they've changed the way they come out of Deep Strike. So before, it was any movement phase where you'd pick this unit if it is hidden among the mobs, then pick a friendly Moon Clan Shooters or Moon Clan Stabbers unit that has 10 or more models to be the target. Set up this unit, so the Loon Smasher Fanatics, anywhere on the battlefield wholly within 6 of the target and more than 9-inch from all enemy units. Now this would be in the movement phase, and you might think, oh, well then I can make a move. Well no, you can't make a move if you have used a setup ability. So you weren't going to move, but you would be wholly within 6 of the target and outside of 9. Which is interesting, because if you did it on your movement phase with the old version of the War Scroll, then you have a 9-inch charge to hit. Or they can kind of screen out maybe a counter charge, and then your unit's going to get to strike first. Or if you did in your opponent's movement phase, which is probably the preferred method, then they would step out, still outside of 9 of enemy units, but because you use movement phase abilities after they do, you wouldn't be able to set it up necessarily in front of your Stabbers or Shooters unit, because they might have moved and then blocked that off, so you couldn't have actually gotten your guys out. Also, one of the problems with the ability was that the unit that they were jumping out of had to have 10 or more models at the moment that you did it. Now, you didn't have to say which unit they were hidden in, so you had flexibility if you had multiple units that qualified. But considering the base size of those units, and they're pretty squishy, was 20, then it wasn't too hard for the opponent to get them knocked down to 9, and then you could lose your Loon Smasher Fanatics for the whole game. Let's look at how it works now. So once per turn army, and keep in mind the old version of this ability wasn't once per turn army, so you could bring out any number of Loon Smasher Fanatics around even the same Moon Clan Shooters or Moon Clan Stabbers unit to jump out. I think, because even though you did pick that unit to be the target, I don't think it would have counted as a passive ability for the rest of the turn. I could be wrong about that, but at least you could pick different units to jump out of, if nothing else. Someone let me know if you have a thought on that, because I know that sometimes when an ability gets used on an ability like a buff that stays on them, it counts as a passive, and then you can't stack 2 passives on the same unit. But anyway, so in any case, it's now once per turn army, any charge phase, so we still kept any, but now we've moved to the charge phase. So you pick this unit if it's lost in the horde, so here. And you'll see down here below, it's a core, move, and charge ability. So they're getting a charge ability that they can use in the opponent's charge phase or in your own. Set up this unit anywhere on the battlefield wholly within 3 inch of a friendly Moonclan Stabas or Moonclan Shooters unit, and doesn't say anything about how many models they have. So even if they're down to 1 model, still works. Then this unit, the Fanatics, can move 2d6 inches. It's basically like rolling a charge. It can pass through enemy models and their combat ranges and can even end that move in combat. Then roll a dice for each enemy unit in combat with this unit or that this unit passed across as part of that move. Inflict an amount of mortal damage on that unit equal to the roll. So interestingly, they kind of gain flying for that charge. They can move over whatever they want. They're rolling a normal die, so a d6, and doing that amount of damage, which is pretty good. Obviously, you're only doing it once, regardless of how big this unit is, per unit. So if you got to fly over, I don't know, 2-3 units, you're rolling 1d6 per unit and then doing that much immortal damage. That's kind of cool. Then you're in combat. Now, something that occurs to me is it says set up this unit anywhere on the battlefield wholly within 3 of a friendly Moonclan Stabas or Moonclan Shooters unit. So you think about what the implications here are. Say it's your charge phase. Your Moonclan Stabas weren't in combat at the beginning of that turn, and then they charge in. It seems like this is saying as long as you set them up wholly within 3 inches, they can in fact be set up within combat, regardless of whether the Moonclan Stabas or Shooters unit was in combat. But now, of course, they're standing right next to a given unit. If that unit was already in combat, same story, it's just in the charge phase. And by the way, you could use this, you could pull this off before that Moonclan Stabas or Shooters unit had charged or after, because you get to determine the order in which you use charge phase abilities. So if you wanted, you could just not have your unit charge in. Maybe they're standing outside of 3, and then they jump out and then go do stuff. I'm pretty sure there's no rule that says you can't set up a unit in combat, because usually it says that in the rule itself. I would have to consult the core rules. If someone knows off the top of their head, let me know if it has a rules reference. But at worst case, you have to set up outside of combat, and then you make this move, which means you're still going to pass over that unit and be in combat, unless you roll 2 1s or something. But I think it might even allow you to set up in combat. And then if we think about in the enemy's charge phase, now this would be after that enemy unit has maybe made a charge, because you have to wait until all of their charge abilities are done, and then you pull the trigger on this move and pull them out. Now keep in mind, when I say pull the trigger, I also mean this army, even though it says once per turn army, it's also once per game per unit, because you can't go back into Lost in the Horde to be able to pull this trick off again. So you get to pull that trigger once per game, basically, with Fanatics units, each one. And as long as it's not more than once per turn. And so they come in, and then it's, again, a question of whether you can set up in combat or not, but I'm pretty sure you can. And otherwise, you have to be set up outside of 3, but then they get to do the move and do some mortal damage and all kinds of stuff. Now, what are you really trading this for? This is a lot of techie differences here. Is this better than the original version of the Warscroll? And keep in mind they're at the same points cost as what they currently cost. They lost strike first, but now, and the timing of this too has changed. I think there's definitely a better chance they're going to do some damage, because they're going to get some mortal damage off, maybe against multiple units, could be good. They could even snipe a hero, by the way. Just flying over a hero and rolling a 5+, could get a foot hero and kill him. The changing of timing for the phase, it does mean they're probably more likely to get in, especially considering that the opponent, they had to be set up outside of 9 of the opponent's units, and if you, the best way to maybe get a guaranteed countercharge or something was to let them with the base version of the Warscroll step out after they've done all their movement, but then they have to be outside of 9, then your opponent charges in, and then maybe you've got a good countercharge, or they're going to be tagged or something. But you'd probably want to run like a thin line of Shooters or Stabas in that case, and then step out on the back side of them, so that they are automatically implicitly within 3 inches to be able to fight as a whole unit if they do charge the Shooters or Stabas. Obviously, this new version of the rule doesn't have a limit to a minimum amount that unit has to be for them to step out. I think in general, I think this is a better rule and a better version of the unit. That said, it's less swingy, but that makes it more reliable. Even so, their output's going down a little bit. Losing strike first is rough, but then again, they're doing some amount of mortal damage implicitly here. And if you get lucky, maybe you're really doing some crazy damage. You guys will have to let me know what you think about this. Yeah, I've got mixed feelings about it, but I like it. And I've been wanting to play some amount of Fanatics list for quite some time now. So this is definitely scratching some kind of itch, and I'd be down to try both versions. So let's take a look at the Spore Splatas. Same story here with like regards to the wheel and the keyword. Nothing's changed there. In terms of their weapon, it used to be D3 on 3 up, 4 up, -1 D3, and now it's a flat 2. So less swingy. This was never necessarily a huge melee unit. They're not bad by any means. But in contrast to the Loon Smashes, the way they used to be with Strike First and all their shenanigans, this unit was used more for buffing the stuff around them. So let's talk about what they used to do. They had a deployment phase move, a normal move they could make, and with 2d6 inches that could be underwhelming or quite nice to help you set up, say, something like a take the flanks or whatever, where you want to get up in the front of the fray, maybe steal an objective from the beginning. Granted, with 2d6 it wasn't guaranteed, but still good. They lost that, and they also had a passive ability where they are adding 1 to the attack's characteristic of melee weapons used by other friendly Moon Clan units that are wholly within 12. And keep in mind, Moon Clan units included squigs, but of course the squigs themselves had companion and therefore were not getting the +1 attack. But if you had like Boingrot Bounders, then you were buffing them up by, I think, by adding, how many attacks do they have? 2 or 3? So you're adding at least 50%, maybe, or sorry, at least 33%, maybe 50% if they had 2 attacks. And then furthermore, that rule also had subtract 1 from the attack's characteristic of melee weapons used by enemy units while those enemy units, are in combat with this unit. Now you'll see that passive still stays here, but it's actually interesting because it used to be -1 from the attack's characteristic of melee weapons while they're in combat, but now it's -1 from attack characteristic of all weapons, which means if a unit has shoot in combat, they would be, let's say Sentinels or something would go from 2 attacks to 1 attack, which halves their output. That's pretty good. Granted, this unit's probably dead anyway because it's, even if you reinforce it, it's only 10 health on a 6+ save, no ward, but you know, you get the idea. And then your opponent, I guess the tech here is also your opponent is having to choose in combat, are they going to kill off this unit first at the exchange or trade-off of maybe putting more attacks into a more threatening unit? Or are they just so that they can get more of their attacks back? Or are they going to let this keep standing there and just take the reduction of their attacks? So this is basically the same, but it got a little better against shooting attacks. And then obviously, like I said, they lost the pregame move, but now they have once per turn army end of any turn. Now, of course, anytime you see once per turn army, especially for an ability like this that you're going to be able to use multiple times in a game for this one unit, as in contrast to this where it's implicitly only 1 time per unit. If you were bringing multiple copies of either one of these Fanatics units, the once per turn army abilities are reducing how much of a benefit, at least in 1 turn, that you're getting out of all that. So like, whereas you used to be able to just let all of your Loon Smasher units pop out at the same time, or all of these guys make a pregame move, now you're having to use these similar abilities only once per turn, which again for this ability isn't so bad, the one on the Fanatics, because they're implicitly only using it once per game. But let's look at this spinning loons to see what I'm talking about. So this end of any turn, so it's your opponent's turns as well. This unit can move 2d6. It can move through the combat ranges of enemy units, but not fly over them, by the way, and can finish that move in combat. So this is pretty cool because if the opponent does let them stay there, then you can kind of hop over every single turn and move up the board to go either get out of combat, so you're free to go charge somewhere else or go take something else the following turn, or you can go set yourself in combat with, say, a shooting unit that doesn't want to be stuck in combat for the next turn, and you can go choke up that shooting potential. I actually think this ability is secretly really strong and probably ultimately a lot better than a pregame move. Though a pregame move is fun, I can imagine a world where you are teleporting this unit, say with Hand of Gork, to somewhere within 24 inches of the caster. You set them up, and then say they ignore that unit or whatever, at the end of that turn, every single turn, one of these units gets to move 2d6 and can go lock some unit up. They could go steal an objective, and this would be before you end up adding up the points for the battle round. So there could be some good tech there. I like this, and they're 20 points cheaper, down to 70 points, if I've got that right. Yeah, 70 points for 5. They're not buffing the guys around them, but I don't know that they need to be doing that anyway. I mean, like, squigs were already a good bit faster than these guys, especially if you roll poorly on this, and the squigs rolled well, and they're not getting the same kind of like squig buffs to their random movement characteristic. But yeah, I think there could be some play here. I don't think either one of these is totally changing the complexion of how these two units may or may not be taken, but I could see some tech here. It's just they're so squishy and die so easily, and losing strike first for the fanatics especially is a difference maker. But sniping some heroes with some mortal damage could be big. Who knows? Okay, let's take a look at the new rules. So if you're keeping track, we are now once again getting something new. We've seen battle formations pop up in 3 out of 4 of the updates thus far. That's for Skaven, Feck, and now Gitz. But this is our first time seeing a new spell lore. So kind of for the fun of it, why don't we talk about the spell lore first? Just mix things up. Let me tell you about the spell lore that we already had. We had 3 spells. 2 of them were cast at a value of 7 and 1 at 6. And the one that was cast at 6 is your unlimited spell. That was Bad Portents, which is where you could move the moon around. Okay? So now I'm really intrigued because remember, you can only pick one lore. And so this is officially pushing Gitz to be the only 3rd army, if I'm not mistaken, that has 2 spell lores to choose from. That's going to be Tzeentch with 2 and Seraphon with 2. Not even Lumineth has 2 yet, but maybe they'll get another one in this update. But now Tzeentch is the 3rd to join those ranks. Now this is their unlimited spell. So the old unlimited spell, the current one, is the one where you have to cast it at 6. Then you roll a die, so it has to go through 2 filter steps. It may be 3 if you consider unbinding 1. On a 3 to 5, the face of the bad moon moves to the next face. On a 6, you get to pick the face of the bad moon. And then you could do that because it's unlimited, as many times as you have wizards. Now, our unlimited spell has nothing to do with the moon, apparently. You cast a spell, pick up to 3 visible friendly Gitz units holding than 12 to be the targets, and then make a casting roll. Each target can immediately, so in the hero phase, use a retreat ability as if it were your movement phase. No mortal damage is inflicted by those retreat abilities. Now, keep in mind that the way that retreating interacts with shooting and charging is that it's, if I'm not mistaken, on the shooting and charging rules that say that if you retreated, you can't use those rules. It's not the retreat ability, and even still, you'd still be using a retreat ability because it says you're using it here. So this is allowing 3 of your units to get out of the danger without taking mortal damage, but then they're not going to do anything for the rest of the turn. Is that true? Let's see. Can you make... Yeah, you would still be able to move, if I'm not mistaken. You would still be able to make a normal move or run with that unit because the core move ability just says that you can't do 2 of those in the same phase, but this would be in the hero phase. So then you'd be retreating out of combat, not taking any damage, and then making a normal move to go get somewhere. Or run to go get somewhere and steal an objective or get set up for a better turn next turn. I'm trying to think about what kind of tech this would really do. I mean, it's saving your butt for sure. It's getting some heroes out of danger that are stuck in combat that would probably die that turn. If you had something in the new battle tactics that's equivalent to Do Not Waver, where you're worried about that one unit getting picked off for free, this would be kind of helping you mitigate those risks. It's obviously great for movement shenanigans in general, but remember, we're losing the whole other spell lore. So you're losing being able to move the moon around, apparently. You're also losing the teleport for Hand of Gork. I mean, we'll see what the other ones are here, but remember, you're losing some amount of tech implicitly by taking these, so keep that in mind. But let's talk about those other 2 spells that existed in the spell lore. So I just mentioned Hand of Gork. It's where you could remove a given other unit because the caster, they've already kind of ruled this. The caster can't teleport themselves because then they have to set up within themselves and they're not on the table anymore, so they would die. But anyway, you'd remove another target unit from the battlefield, set it up wholly within 24 of the caster, and more than 9 inches from all enemy units, and it had to be a unit that wasn't in combat. So we're losing that one. That was on a 7. And then we were also losing Spore Maws, where you pick 3 visible enemy units within 12, and on a 2 plus D3, you're doing that much damage. So let's see what we replace them with. Git Speed. Pick a friendly Gloomspite Gitz wizard to cast a spell. Until the start of your next turn, add 2 inches to the move characteristic of friendly non-Troggoth Gloomspite Git units while they're wholly within 12 inches of this unit. Okay, so the wizard itself is the beacon for this. And then they're going to add 2 inches to the move characteristic of non-Troggoth Gitz units. So that's going to be, including the spiders, by the way. I don't know how much spider stuff we're seeing these days. It's going to include the Git mob. It's going to include all the squigs with their random movement and all the fanatics that we just looked at. So you're adding 2 to the move characteristic, which is nice. Keep in mind with those those fanatics units we just saw, this is not referencing its move characteristic. It's just saying 2d6. So it's like a charge move. It's not looking at this, so that wouldn't change anything. And this ability here is also not referencing its move characteristic. It just happens to be the same. So it wouldn't be buffing either one of those. Okay? But it would be buffing, say, a power through with something if you happen to get a charge off. And then let's look at Gaze of Glareface. Pick a friendly Gloomspite Gitz wizard to cast a spell. Pick a visible enemy unit within 18. Until the start of your next turn, the target cannot use run abilities, and that would include redeploy, and have the range characteristic of the target's ranged weapons. Okay. We don't see a whole lot of odd range, so I think having would still put it exactly half, but I'd have to consult the core rules. But at least with the even ones, it's obvious what half is going to be. So if you've got an 18-inch range, it goes down to 9, which is a pretty big penalty on shooting units that are trying not to get locked up in combat to be able to use their shooting. And they can't run, so no redeploy. Yeah, I guess this is a cool ability. I would... The Spore Maw's ability for the mortal damage on 3 units is fine. It's whatever. But the Hand of Gork was really kind of one of the big clutch spells that you're giving up for this. And I guess you could kind of compare this one to it, to have basically your whole army, if you've got enough wizards, could be allowing your whole army to retreat and get the hell out of combat. And then make a move and get you set up. But the thing is, again, if you're relying on them to do some melee tricks, they're not going to be able to. Unless they have some ability that lets them cheat their way into combat by doing some kind of movement trick or something. I suppose one thing you could do is you could have them back out of combat and then have those fanatics that we're just talking about. They could spring in and then get into combat, but I don't know how good that is. And adding 2 inches to your movement, but not for Troggoths. That's kind of brutal for the Troggoths because they would be the probably prime target that would like to get that extra move. In general, I don't know. I have mixed feelings about this spell lore. Those people that are actively playing Gitz right now, let me know what you think. Gitz is one of my armies, but I was mainly a Squigs build. Not really ever played the Trogs build except against it. And I haven't gotten a chance to play any of the new Git mob stuff or spider stuff, really. But it's one of my least played armies in terms of at least tournament. I've played it only 2 tournaments with a Squigs list. Okay, let's take a look at the new battle formations. Maybe these will synergize with the spell lore. So we've got the first is the Sunbiter Pack. That's once per turn army, any combat phase ability. Pick up to 3 friendly Git mob units that charged this turn to be the targets. Add 1 to the Rend characteristic of companion weapons used by the targets for the rest of the turn. Okay, so it's obviously focusing on the Git mob. I don't know the Git mob Warscrolls too well. But I do think that was one of the points of contention with them, was that all of the buffs you were kind of getting from the Git mob side of the buffosphere, if you will, was buffing the riders only. And so now that we're buffing, say, like the Snarlfang companions, they were the ones that were doing the damage. So like I'm looking at Snarlfang riders right now. The Snarlfang itself, the mount, had 2 attacks on 4s, 3s, no Rend 2, so now it's going up to Rend 1 if it charged. Let's see. Snarlpack Cavalry, this is going to be the new guys with 2 guys on it. Their jaws were 3 attacks, 4s, 3s, no Rend 2, and so forth. We're getting this kind of thing. And then the chariots are also going to be getting those as well. Now the thing is, even though it's any combat phase, which means it could be in your opponent's, it has to be units that charge, and so only 1 unit implicitly is charging in counter charge. So in your opponent's turn, only one unit would be getting it, but in your own turn, you could be getting it on 3. Now, keep in mind that the battle formation that the Git mob had was the one where they could like do a retreat. Let me read that out loud because you would be giving this up to get the new one. So it was a your movement phase ability. Pick a friendly Git mob unit that is in combat to use this ability. Then you can pick an enemy unit in combat with that Git mob unit to be the target. Same enemy unit cannot be picked by the target of this ability more than once per phase. And this is an ability that isn't once per phase, so every one of your Git mob units was eligible to do this. If you pick the target, roll a d3 on a 2+, do that much damage. Then the unit using this ability can make move a distance up to its movement characteristic. It can move through the combat ranges of enemy units, but cannot end that move in combat. And this was a core retreat move, so you were basically doing a retreat that could do some damage and get you out of there. And then that was coupled with what you would be getting from for the Git mob stuff if you were under the light of the bad moon. That was friendly Git mob units can use charge and shoot abilities even if they used a retreat ability in the same turn. So those were used in combo to kind of retreat out of combat and then go do some damage and charge back in and still shoot and do whatever. So now you'd be giving that up to just have extra Ren from your companions on the charge. Anyone that's played the Git mob stuff thus far, and obviously they're new and they're not very popular in the meta yet, let me know what you're thinking about that new formation and what that means to be giving up the other combos. And our last new addition to Gits is the Gittish Tide. Once per turn army, end of any turn, so it could be in your opponent's. Pick a friendly non-squig Moon Clan unit, so that's pretty clear. It's the guys with the cowls that aren't on squigs. That is contesting an objective, not necessarily one you control, to be the target. Add 1 to the control score of the target unit for each model in that unit that is not contesting any objectives. Okay, let me read that one more time. So we're adding 1 to the control score of the target unit. So remember, there's control characteristic. That's what's printed on the weapon wheel of your like save and wounds characteristic and all that. That's per model, but this is the control score, and that's per unit. So you're only adding 1 to the control score of the target unit, but for each model in that unit that is not contesting any objectives. So pick a friendly. So we're picking a unit that is contesting an objective, but in some weird way, you want to have models not on the objective to add more to the control score. Put another way, what this is really saying is that, say you've got a unit of Stabas, the ones that are standing on it are clearly counting as being part of the control score. And they have a control score of 1 in any case, so that doesn't change anything. And then all the models that aren't standing on that objective are also counting towards it. So basically, it's kind of like what the old 3rd edition version of Stabas was, where you could be standing within 9 inches of an objective instead of like the old version was 6, and then being controlling it. This is kind of a reiteration of that, but it could be for any amount of squig units, or non-squig Moon Clan units. Implicitly, it's not for heroes because since a hero only has 1 model, by putting a toe on the objective to qualify for this, you don't have any models that aren't on the objective, so it's not helping. But for any unit that's got 2 or more models, and well, largely for any amount that can't stand on the objective, this could help you really start stealing some objectives. So you could even just have a Stabas unit that has 40 models in it with 1 toe on there, that guy's counting, and then all the other 40 or 39 are counting plus the banner, which is pretty cool. There might be some tech here. I don't know if you're taking this over, say, any of the other battle formations that were available to the Git stuff. For example, you had one for Spiderfang, but Spiderfang are, I'd have to look. Are they Moon Clan as well? I don't think so. I think they've been separated out. I think they're just their separate thing. But they sometimes get some of the same buffs, like in the Spreading Lunacy ability. And then obviously the squig stuff, but this is non-squig anyway. And there's a Trog thing. So I guess this is the one that's kind of built for your regular Moon Clan dudes. Otherwise, they had the pile-in move and do some damage with 3 guys. This might be better. I don't know. Someone who likes to play lots of Horde Gits, let me know what you think. So overall, this is interesting. I don't know if I'd say this is on Skaven level. I still think out of the first 4 that we've seen, I think Skaven's the strongest. in terms of what it's done for giving you new builds and new potential, and basically everything that Skaven got was cool. This to me feels a bit closer to maybe what we saw with Feck. I could see some stuff where you'd want to play around this, but I don't know if this is changing everything. I think this is good for Gitmob, at least in the sense it changes their playstyle entirely, where now maybe you're actually interested in those companion weapons. Maybe it'll buff up the amount of rend you do. I don't think it would have been that crazy to just give +1 rend to all Gitmob that charge that turn, because now they can't freely retreat and charge. I think that would have been okay, but maybe they play tested it and 3 was a good cap for that. Plus, who knows how many units you're actually going to have, but those units are so dirt cheap that there's definitely the possibility that you would have more units than 3 that would want to be using this at a given time for a big turn where you made a big charge. And then this is kind of cool. Like I said, it's kind of giving those foot Moon Clan dudes some more options. But if you have all of your unit on the objective anyway, then it's not making that big of a difference, or most of your unit, I should say. Obviously, if all of your unit's on there, then it's not doing anything, and it's only for 1 unit. So keep that in mind. The spell lore, yeah, I don't know how I feel about that. Now, you could combine this retreat ability. No, that doesn't even really help either. I was going to say with the Gitmob stuff, but the Gitmob, the part that was under the sun was the retreat and charge, or under the moon, I mean, but it's kind of the sun for them. That's still the case here, that even if they use this, they're going to want to be able to be under the light of the bad moon. It just means that you're not doing the damage on the way out. I don't know. You guys let me know what you think about these rules. I think they're fine, and it's a decent enough expansion, and I think the 2 new units, or the 2 new versions of these units, are totally fine. Maybe slight upgrades, some tech here, maybe a better chance of guaranteeing that they get in with the Fanatics at the cost of having Strike first. So, yeah, kind of middle score for these guys, but looking forward to seeing what we got next week, and it sounded like from the preview hint that Night Haunt will be on Monday. So hopefully I'll get another weekend video out this weekend for you guys talking about Worlds. If not, I'll try to get it out sooner than later next week. But in the meantime, guys, thanks so much for everything, and Ryan out.